You know, it's Halloween season and I've already dropped 2 horror-esque videos this month, so why not drop a third one before it's over? So today or tonight, I'm gonna be going over my personal top 10 picks for the creepiest Soulsborne levels. Again, this is just my personal top 10. Also, if you like videos like this, then be sure to like and subscribe, only if you want to, and without wasting any more of your time, let's get right into the list. For a honorable mention, we have Sen's Fortress. Sen's Fortress stands out from most other areas in Lordran. While most places in the game feel decayed and airy, they still have an odd sense of calmness. Sen's Fortress though feels anything but calm. The fortress serves as a testing ground for those who are trying to reach the city of Londo, and every corner of it feels like a trap. The fortress is filled with deadly obstacles. Right from the start, you're faced with swinging blades along narrow walkways that requires precise timing to avoid. As you progress, snake-like enemies known as serpent soldiers appear. These strange, intimidating creatures not only look creepy but can also attack with lightning, making them especially dangerous. The traps don't stop there. Giant boulders roll down certain paths, crushing anyone who gets in the way. There are even hidden pressure plates that trigger more attacks if you step on them. The atmosphere of Sen's Fortress is unnerving, almost like wandering through a haunted house. Every step feels tense as if something terrible is just around the corner. Unlike the other areas in Dark Souls where you might feel a strange sense of peace, Sen's Fortress keeps you constantly on edge, making it one of the most intense areas in the game. While it is somewhat of a creepy level, it is relatively short, which takes away some points. From the moment I stepped into this area, I knew it would be a creepy experience. Right outside, there's a graveyard full of undead shuffling around, and as you move inside, you enter an eerie, giant cathedral with strange creatures like towering giants and undead knights. The entire place feels unsettling and keeps you on edge, but the scariest part comes near the end, where the Deacons of the Deep are located. Imagine walking into a dark room and suddenly you see a crowd of undead deacons with glowing red eyes rising from the ground and staring at you. It's a chilling sight that catches you off guard. While this place isn't terrifying in every corner, it has enough creepy elements to make it memorable. The mix of undead enemies, the gloomy cathedral setting, and the haunting final room with the deacons all adds up to an atmosphere that's disturbing in a subtle way. It may not be the scariest area in the Soul series, but it definitely has enough eerie details to leave an impression. Now let's move on to the actual top 10, and at the number 10 spot we have the Undead Crypt. The Undead Crypt is downright eerie. Sure, there are a lot of creepy areas in Dark Souls too, but this one stands out to me the most. From the start, you're surrounded by pitch black hallways and dim torchlights, which gives the whole place a tomb-like feel. As you move through the crypt, undead figures start rising from the ground, slowly coming to life as if they've been waiting for an intruder. These aren't your typical enemies, they're ghostly knights and ancient spirits who seem bound to the place. Adding to the tension, certain parts of the crypt are completely dark, forcing you to light a torch just to see where you're going. Overall, the Undead Crypt feels oppressive and alive in its own way, with every corner holding some kind of danger. It's one of the only areas of the game where I just wanted to leave immediately. At number 9 we have Oolacile. Oolacile was once a regular town with regular citizens. However, unfortunately, after some of the residents revived a primordial man known as Manos, he caused the spread of a corruption known as the Abyss. The Abyss deforms and maddens people, turning them into monsters. And going through Oolacile, you realize how horrifying this Abyss really is, as most of the citizens are now mutated and maddened creatures. Going through this area even without knowing the lore was an eerie experience, as everything just looks dark and decayed and there's barely any sense of calm. Progressing through the level gets worse as you enter the chasm of the Abyss. This area is pitch black and is filled with humanities roaming around. What makes this even worse is that this is where Manos, the father of the Abyss, also resides, and he looks horrifying. All in all, Oolacile, despite not being the scariest level in a Souls game, still deserves a mention due to how creepy the monsters and the whole level looks. Next up we have Tower of Latria. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but Latria looks creepy as hell, especially if we're talking about the weird Cthulhu looking guys. But it's just the dark prison-like aesthetic that gives off this weird vibe. I don't know how to describe it, but yeah. Apparently it was even creepier in the PS3 version. But yeah, Latria is definitely scary as hell. The Forbidden Woods in Bloodborne is one of the most unsettling areas in the game, with an atmosphere that feels straight out of a horror movie. From the moment you enter, there's this weird vibe to the place, making everything feel mysterious and hostile. It's also different from what we're used to, as up until this point we were mostly in the town of Yharnam, and switching from that to the woods was drastic. It's also easy to get lost here. The twisted paths and dense trees makes the navigation difficult, and you often feel like you're walking in circles with no way out. The enemies you encounter only add to the horror. The snake creatures are some of the creepiest in Bloodborne. They are massive, and there are also the snake-headed men that you also have to watch out for. Their presence is disturbing and unnatural, adding a layer of fear to every encounter. As if that weren't enough, the woods are full of traps. You will find hidden pitfalls, deadly spikes, and traps just waiting to catch you off guard, making every step feel risky. These traps, combined with the twisted paths and strange creatures, give the forest an overall feeling of dread. With its eerie silence broken only by the occasional distant scream or rustling in the bushes, the Forbidden Woods feel like it's alive and watching you. It's the kind of place that keeps you on edge, making you feel as though something horrible could leap out at any moment. It's a place that truly makes you feel alone, lost, and surrounded by danger. On my first playthrough, I generally tried to avoid this area. Ghost enemies that I couldn't even hit? Man, fuck that. But unfortunately, it's a required area, so I had to face it eventually. The whole place has this unsettling, haunted atmosphere. The ghosts themselves are creepy enough. They float around, moving through walls and attacking you with very little warning. And the fact that they can hit you from almost any angle only makes things worse. The dim lighting and eerie silence adds to the vibe, making every shadow and movement feel like a threat. And then there are the dark raids. As terrifying as the ghosts are, the dark raids are somehow worse. They're powerful, aggressive, and their twisted armor and fighting style makes them more intimidating. Each encounter with them feels intense. New Londo itself is in ruins, dark and flooded with crumbling buildings and staircases that seem to lead nowhere. The whole place feels cursed, like the spirits of the dead are trapped there forever. It's an area that really captures a haunted, hopeless vibe, making it one of the most unsettling parts of Dark Souls. The Nightmare of Mensis in Bloodborne is for sure top 3 creepiest Bloodborne levels, and it doesn't waste any time making that clear. From the moment you step inside, there's an overwhelming sense that something is very wrong. The walls are decorated with grotesque haunting faces that seem to watch your every move, setting a deeply unsettling tone. Then of course there are the creatures. Strange twisted monsters lurk everywhere, and some of the worst are the giant glowing eye creature that inflicts frenzy just by looking at you. The frenzy status builds up rapidly, driving up tension as you try to avoid it, but this creature is positioned in a way that makes that nearly impossible. The whole level feels like it's designed to keep you on edge mentally. As you make your way further in, the horror ramps up even more. An eerie baby's cry echoes through the halls, a sound that's disturbing, relentless, and adds to the feeling that you're trapped in a nightmare you can't escape. Combined with the strange ambient noises and eerie atmosphere, the Nightmare of Mensis truly lives up to its name as one of the most haunting Soulsborne levels, at least in my opinion. The upper Cathedral ward in Bloodborne is one of the game's creepiest areas. The dimly lit hallways and quiet rooms make it feel like something's always watching you, and the dark gothic architecture only adds to the unsettling vibe. As you explore, you run into the celestial emissaries, strange alien-like enemies with twitchy movements and almost human-like faces that makes them even more disturbing. You can also run into Ebrietas, which is another alien-like creature. Then there are the brain-suckers, known for draining your inside, making you more vulnerable. They are relentless and adds to the feeling that the place is full of horror and corruption. The further you go, the tighter the halls and darker the rooms become, eerie sounds echoing around you, making every footstep feel risky. This tension builds up until you face the werewolves in pitch black rooms where they lunge at you from the shadows. While the upper cathedral has a haunting vibe, it's still not the creepiest area in the game. It's pretty short, which keeps it from reaching the same level of dread as other places I've yet to mention. At third spot, we have the Research Hall from Bloodborne, and yes, yet another Bloodborne level makes this list. The Research Hall is one of the game's most unsettling areas, bringing in an intense, eerie vibe that's hard to shake. Right from the start, you're greeted by the dimly lit halls and an oppressive silence broken only by distant whispers and unsettling sounds. It feels like a place where horrible experiments have taken place, and you're walking right into the aftermath. As you explore, you encounter the patients, twisted, malformed figures who seem trapped between life and death. They shuffle around the halls, often muttering in pain or confusion, and some even call out for help. These patients are heartbreaking and terrifying at the same time, looking like they've suffered through unimaginable experiments. Each encounter with them feels like a glimpse into the horrors that took place here, and their presence is a constant reminder of the twisted nature of the Healings Church's work. Adding to the horror, the research hall is structured like a maze with winding staircases and twisting hallways that makes it easy to get lost. You never feel safe, and it's easy to stumble into ambushes or unexpected horrors around each corner. The deeper you go, the worse it gets. The environment, sound, and enemy placement all works together to create an atmosphere that's equal parts sad and terrifying. The research hall feels haunted by the souls of those who suffered here, making it one of Bloodborne's most chilling areas and a perfect example of horror through atmosphere and storytelling. I don't care what anyone say, the Tomb of the Giants is one of the scariest areas in the entire Soul series. Even the level before this one was scary as it's filled with skeletons and bone wheels, but the Tomb of the Giant takes things up a notch by making the area pitch black, meaning without a proper light source, you're gonna have an extremely hard time. But what makes this level infamous in my opinion is not only the darkness, but it's the enemies. Most of the enemies here are large giant skeletons, which adds to the horror. The final boss of this area, Gravelord Nido, is also just a horrifying creature. This whole level is just unsettling. And at the number 1 spot, we have the Abyssal Woods. Now I know a lot of you guys are probably saying that this placement is bad because the Abyssal Woods is just a large empty area with few enemies in it, and you know what? You're right on the last part. But you're lying if you told me that this wasn't at least a bit tense on your first playthrough, especially when dealing with the unkillable enemies. And I know you can parry and kill them now, but I'm pretty sure a lot of people didn't know that on their first playthrough. I mean, as soon as you step into this place, there's this weird haunting vibe, and what made it even scary at first was the fact that Torrent was too scared to be summoned. This whole level itself just feels eerie, and then you have the unkillable enemies that can spot you from a distance. This whole level feels like a horror game as it takes away one of your primary modes of transport. Having to sneak around due to the powerlessness you feel makes this even more terrifying, as it's one of the only times in these type of games where you feel completely powerless. Now again, as I mentioned before, on subsequent playthroughs, this level doesn't hit the same because you know everything, especially how to defeat the enemies, and you also know that the area is relatively empty. But again, on a first time playthrough, this level was definitely the scariest one I've played through in a Souls game. If you've made it this far, I just want to say thanks for watching, and let me know your picks for the creepiest Soulsborne levels down in the comments. Also, shout out to my Patreon members, Mac, Jabroni Jones, and Daniel Scotland. Thank you guys for the additional support, and thank you to all who's watching. I hope you guys have a good one.